A while ago, I made a video called Can a Budget Deck Keep Up? And I talked about how if your deck has repeatable removal and card draw, then your deck can in fact keep up against other more expensive lists. And that video ended up being one of my most popular ever. I've gotten tons of comments from players telling me they picked up one of the budget decks I made in that video and how much they enjoyed it. So I decided to run it back here. I'm making 3 more budget decks that can keep up against almost any casual list because of powerful value engines. Additionally, there's another video I made about precons, and a lot of players seemed confused about how and where to buy cards to avoid paying a lot in shipping, so I'm going to provide a mini tutorial on how to actually pick up one of these lists and keep the prices down. I also want to just talk about budget lists for a moment. In the previous video, I talked about how having repeatable removal and card draw is a way for budget decks to keep up. And I still agree, this is why control decks are some of the best budget lists out there. Doesn't really matter how expensive the card they cast is, if you remove it or counter it with a cheap removal spell, you were able to stop it. And this is why last time the decks were all kind of mid-rangey control piles. This time I made one aggro list as well, and I'll talk about it more later. I also wanted to address one other thing. Whenever I talk about budget decks, players try to actually me in the comments. Look, I get it's fun when you catch the YouTuber out on a mistake, but friends, I am aware Cyclonic Rift is a powerful card, and it would improve the mono blue deck I'm about to talk about. There are indeed individually powerful cards which will improve these lists. You can make the deck stronger. Alternatively, people like to say, haha, what about CEDH? Those decks are expensive, right? And 1, no, because proxies, but also 2, no, because that's not the point. When I say this is a budget list that can keep up at any table, it's because of the game plan. Having a coherent and efficient game plan is the best thing you can do for a deck, even if you miss out on some individually powerful cards. Also, the price of cards is not directly correlated to power. Many things affect price. Sol Ring is likely the strongest card you own, but I doubt it's the most expensive. Ad Nauseam is the most powerful card in most CDH decks, but it is much cheaper than any of the dual lands. CDH decks are strong because they have individually good cards and a coherent game plan, the two things that make a deck powerful. The second part, a coherent game plan, can be recreated on a budget. That's this whole video. But before I talk about buying cards, I want to talk about sorting cards. As many of us know, card sorting lizards are able to organize 999 cards an hour. This has been the gold standard of card sorting for a long time, but this record has been broken by Card Castle's Card Bot. This is able to sort 1,000 cards in an hour. Now, getting your hands on one of these as an individual is difficult, but your LGS might already have one. Using my link in the description, you can find a map of all the stores that have a card bot. And you can head to one of those stores, log in with your account, and scan a ton of cards right there. Then once scanned, you can digitally sort through your collection with ease. And if you don't have an account, don't worry. It's free to sign up. Plus, if you use my link, you will get 1 free month of premium access. Thanks to Card Castle for sponsoring the video. Okay, let's talk about how to actually buy cards. So these decks are made on a $50 budget. What does that mean? Can you buy it for $50? So, full disclosure, this channel is sponsored by Cool Stuff Inc. I have a promo code with them. If you buy stuff and use the code, I get money. Now, Cool Stuff Inc. is a reasonable way to buy cards, but when I talk about it, keep in mind I am speaking from a biased perspective. So how do you actually buy singles? Normally, from any website, when you look at the price and then click buy, the initial price seems to be inaccurate. A lot of times that is because of shipping. Sites like TCG Player often have the lowest cost for cards, but since it's a bunch of individual sellers, they all charge shipping individually, which adds up. And also, basic lands sometimes jack up the price a lot. These sites will generally try to find all of the same art for basics, but when you have 30 plus, sometimes it's hard to get all of those from one store. So then it'll try to sort and grab 30 of those same basics from a bunch of different stores, which all then charge individual shipping. Instead, I would recommend just going to like Amazon and grabbing some bundle of basics, or check with your LGS if you can get a bunch of basics from them. I would not recommend buying basics as singles from most online stores. And then once you bought your big bundle of basics, you're kind of set for life. You probably don't need much more than that. Also, you don't need to buy all from one place. Usually between Cool Stuff Inc., Card Kingdom, and TCG Direct, you can probably get all the cards you're looking for and only pay shipping once or twice. This also helps because sometimes a store might not have the cheapest version of a card in stock. They might only have a foil one or only an alternate art one. And because of that, you would have to spend a much higher amount to get the premium version of that card. So by splitting up and using two sellers and then just buying the cheapest versions of each card between the two sellers, you can keep the price down and again, only pay shipping twice. Lastly, you don't need to be so exact when buying a list. These decks that I'm going to be talking about have a core game plan with key cards, but outside of those key cards, the rest of the list is pretty flexible. You could swap out a counterspell for a different one, or a fog for a different one. So if you can't find exactly all of the cards, you can make some small changes. And sometimes your meta might call for a different ratio of cards than I have as well. So it's not even that you're necessarily downgrading the list by doing this. I hope this helps a little bit. I got a lot of comments talking about how they're spending $80+ in shipping when trying to buy decks, and I was genuinely confused because I've been buying cards for a long time and I've never run into an issue like that. Super quick. I also acknowledge that this video is very Amero-centric. I know outside of the United States, it's a little bit different. I don't personally have experience with that, so take that with a grain of salt. Enough yapping, let's talk about the decks in question. Links to all of these in the description below. First, a mono blue control deck with a criminally underplayed commander, Kairi the Swirling Sky. Normally, this might seem kind of bad. The death trigger is decent, but you don't want to be recasting your commander that often, especially if it's a 6-drop. Plus, mono blue doesn't give you easy reanimation effects. This is all true, but that death trigger is still really abusable, and we can do so with clone effects. By making a clone, you then have two legendary creatures with the same name, so you have to sacrifice one. By ditching the clone, you get the death trigger. This lets you either bounce a bunch of things back, or use the secondary effect, which is what this deck is built around. This lets you return the clone effect to hand and one more spell. With instant speed clones, you can go crazy. Someone casts a big bomb, easy. In response, clone your commander, sack the clone, get the counterspell out of your yard, and get the clone back, counter the threat, and then if someone casts something else, you can clone your commander again and get that same counterspell back. If you have enough mana, this is an infinite amount of counterspells. If you don't need to cast any counterspells, on an end step you can bounce everything with an instant speed wipe, and once you have two clone effects, you can use the first death trigger to get both back into hand, and then the second clone effect to get two things back. It's pretty crazy. But it's not just that, you can loop card advantage spells to get crazy value. The game plan is simple. Basically, you play mono blue control, stay alive until you can untap with your commander and a clone effect in hand. And from there, just keep cloning your commander. You can win the game with a Shark Typhoon, which you can make more copies of by looping replication techniques. You just demonstrate it with an opponent to make a copy of Shark Typhoon and then a copy of your commander, get the replication technique and another thing back. And then just keep doing that and just make more and more Shark Typhoons until you can Typhoon out the table. Or you can loop Invoke the Winds as many times as you want to just keep stealing creatures, or make clones of the original Blue Kamigawa Dragon and steal more creatures. Oh, also we have this so you don't deck out. Next is another mid-rangey control pile, but in mono green. So this commander is Ramp with the first ability and a regrowth effect on the second ability if you can get it into your hand, which the first ability puts him into your hand. And when you have enough mana, you can then get multiple things back from the yard. So in the later portion of the game, when you've ramped a ton, because we're in mono green, you can use your commander to redraw a ton of cards. And then you can cast a regrowth effect to get your commander back. And as long as you use your commander to get the regrowth effect back along with anything else, you can always regrowth Shigeki back and just keep the value train going. Repeating fogs over and over again can be really difficult for creature decks to beat. Looping spot removal keeps scary cards out of play. And if you start looping any of these board wipes, it becomes extremely difficult for your opponents to get past your shenanigans. And then just use the big stompy package to win the game. Play big things when they're out of resources, and slam in for lethal. This game plan is very simple, yet extremely effective, and really flexible. I mean, you can loop effectively anything, so put whatever you want in the list. Lastly, I made not a control deck, but a pure aggro list. Well, maybe not pure, it kind of has a plan B. So there are two commanders because they have partner. Dargo the Shipwrecker, which is red and 6 generic for a 7/5 with trample. But as an additional cost to cast this, you can sacrifice any number of artifacts and or creatures. This costs 2 generic less to cast for each permanent sacrifice this way, and 2 less to cast for each other artifact or creature you've sacrificed this turn. Because of this, you can cast Dargo extremely early, and that is 7 trampling commander damage very fast. Jessica, Thrice Reborn, is 2 in a red for a planeswalker that has loyalty counters equal to the number of times you've cast your commander this game. It has 2 effects. One, you can minus X to deal X damage to up to 3 targets, but more importantly, you can plus 0 to target a creature, and then it does triple damage to your opponents. Which means with Dargo, that would be 21 commander damage, and it instantly deletes someone. So the idea is to cast Dargo on turn 2 or 3, follow up with Jessica, and deal 21 commander damage to anybody who doesn't have a blocker. And remember, Dargo has trample, so even if they have a blocker, you usually knock a player out in 2 turns when you're attacking this early. So with this deck, you want to nuke one player ASAP, and then take out one more pretty soon after that, maybe 1 or 2 turns. And then once you're down to a 1v1, they might have the ability to slow you down a bit. So this deck has a plan B. There are a series of value engine cards. In a 1v1, these slower cards can help you keep pace, and you still have the ability to threaten a late game kill by casting both commanders and making Dargo unblockable and giving it haste. This deck has a simple game plan like the rest, but does not loop removal. This is also the list that would improve the most with upgrades. It's not super consistent. You have to mulligan kind of aggressively, and just a little bit more fast mana would really help. But these rituals are like $5 each, so it wasn't really in budget. There are still really explosive plays you can do in this version. Any 0 mana artifact into a red thing that sacks it for 3 1/1 lads gives you a turn 2 Dargo, and if you can play a 3rd land, you can cast Jessica on 3 and take someone out on turn 3. I think it's the weakest of the 3 decks due to its inconsistency, and it's probably the worst at actually getting first place specifically, but I really wanted to make something other than a control pile, so this was my attempt at that. Lastly, I want to point out one thing here. If you look at these lists, you might see that they are all technically bracket 2, but these are not bracket 2 lists, and I don't think you should play them against a random pod of precon players. These lists will crush them. Having a real game plan will power up your deck way more than any individual card. So, even though these don't have game changers, they're still a lot stronger than the average bracket 2 deck. Also, notice how a lot of these just loop stuff from the yard and how Graveyard Hate would really slow these decks down? Just a thought, maybe you should play some Graveyard Hate in your lists. Hey, thanks for watching. Special thanks to my 2-3 patrons whose names you see here, and let me know what you think. Do you like these lists? Are you going to try them out? Do you have any suggestions for them? I'm open to making some changes. Let me know in the comments below.